Hey everybody, it's Charles, your hobby hero, coming at you with another video. Today we're going to be breaking down my top 10 most impactful cards for Ursula's return. If you haven't already though, please hit that subscribe button down in the bottom corner. I do appreciate it. I do put out regular content about the hobbies that I love the most, with this channel being dedicated to the Lorcana game. Now we're going to be looking at the top 10 cards that I think will be the most prevalent and most impactful cards on the upcoming meta. And this time around, we don't have a single legendary that made the top 10 on the list. So take a look at what we've got here, see what you think. Leave me some comments down below on your top picks for this set as well. And let's go ahead and jump in. All right, number 10 on the list is Scuttle, the expert on humans. This uncommon is a 2-drop for Sapphire, 1/3 stat line with 1 lore generation, with the ability Let Me See. When you play this character, look at the top 4 cards of your deck. You may reveal an item card and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. Now this card is really good in items decks, and item decks got a lot of help in this set with a couple of the items cards on this list. He's the first one on our list, really adding a lot of consistency to those items decks, Ruby Sapphire included, plus just giving you an early body if you need to. He's able to trade into the Merfolk and a few of the other, like 2/1 Diablo if they're playing him out, just to kind of slow them down while you're setting your stuff up. So be able to put a body into play and to either dig early for things like Popsicle or your Quill, or late game when you're digging for your Lucky Dimes. The card just adds a ton of consistency to a deck that really needed a little push in that direction. He's inkable too, so it helps in that regards as well. But digging for cards is a lot, and almost always going to be able to replace himself out of your hand with an item in those item-centric decks. Really like this guy, and that is why he's number 10 on the list. Number 9 on the list is We Don't Talk About Bruno, our first song on the list. It is an Emerald 5-drop inkable song. It can return chosen character to the player's hand, and then that player discards a card at random. Now, I really like this card, so I don't want you to think the fact that it's number 9 on the list means I am not a fan of it. I do think that a lot of the Emerald decks right now are really aggressive on the curve, very low on the curve, and with the exception of the Emerald Amber list that are getting played right now, they have a kind of a hard time actually singing this song. Don't get me wrong, playing it for 5 is fine, but really where this card is going to be shining is where it can be sung, and I don't mind it being sung early off of like a 3-drop aerial either. The discard at random is very nice, even if you're discarding a character card. Even though you're returning a character card early in the game that may not be super important, they may have to discard a very important card out of their hand because of that random effect that it has. This card does a lot of what the Emerald decks are looking to do late game, which is return a character off the board and then also get that card out of their hand, all wrapped up into one card. And the fact that this card is inkable is absolutely fantastic as well, and that's why I have it at number 9 on my list. Number 8 on our list is Look at This Family in Amber. It is a 7-drop Sing Together song, which is inkable. Look at the top 5 cards of your deck, and you may reveal up to 2 character cards and put them into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. Now, this song is pretty much relegated to one deck only right now, kind of being that Amber song deck. But the effect is really strong in that deck, being able to exert like a 1-drop Cinderella and a 3-drop Ariel to effectively draw 2 cards, or if you're playing the Emerald build, the 3-drop Ursula and the 3-drop Ariel to effectively draw 4 cards is a very strong effect. This card would be higher on my list if it had more applications outside of like the Amber Singer deck, because unfortunately at 7, you're going to need to sing it with some characters that have the ability to sing above their cost just to make this effect go off, and that's why it's at number 8 on my list. Number 7 on the list is Second Star to the Right, another Sing Together song, this time for Amethyst. It is a 10-drop uninkable song where chosen player draws 5 cards. Now, this card has already found a home in the Jafar list that are being played. A lot of them trying to experiment with the Emerald Jafar list so that they can get the Ursula to trigger and sing this twice. I don't necessarily know that it's necessary to abandon Steel for the Jafar list to get this off, as the 7-drop Jafar sings most of this by himself. Just about any other card in play, and he'll be able to pull this off for a 5-card draw just for you, and gaining 5 lore off of that effect. Very, very strong card, and I do think it is going to make the Jafar decks a bit more consistent, as right now they're basically stuck in a spot where if they don't get a whole new world off with Jafar in play, they really don't have a great way to win. This card is going to provide kind of the redundancy with Jafar in play, but also is going to help dig for that Jafar. If you don't get your whole new world, you have this ability to just draw 5 cards and get 5 cards deeper with this particular card, and I think it's going to add a lot of consistency to those Jafar decks, which we're already doing really well, just maybe struggle with consistency on some of those bigger tournaments, and that's why I have this one at number 7 on my list. All right, number 6 on the list is Philocites, the no-nonsense instructor for Steel. He is a 4-drop inkable 2/3 2-lore generator with the ability you gotta stay focused. All your hero characters gain Challenger +1, and the ability Shameless Promoter. Whenever you play a hero character, gain 1 lore. Now, this guy opens up an archetype all unto himself, and I think has the potential to really bust open our current format. Now, I know a lot of people are basically tweaking last meta's format for the new cards, but I think Philocites has the ability to kind of bust open a whole new format with that hero archetype. There's a lot of synergy with a lot of good heroes already, but that ability to just generate lore out of nowhere we've seen is very strong with cards like Goat Merlin, and even in this set, cards like Super Goof. So I don't think you can underestimate how good that is to just actually be generating that 1 lore. Now, don't get me wrong, the Challenger +1 is very nice as well, and the fact that if you're in a situation where you can safely quest with this guy, he's a 2 lore generator on top of that, is very nice. Now, I would love to see him have either a little bit more survivability or maybe come in at 3 instead of 4, and I think it would have put him in a really, really good spot. But at 4, he still does evade a lot of the targeted removal up to that point in time, with most of that doing only 2 damage, Smash being the exception. We haven't seen a lot of Smash here lately, so I do think this guy has a ton of potential, possibly the highest potential on the list, but right now he's kind of in uncharted territory because we haven't really seen a really defined meta yet, and that's why I have him at number 6 on this list. Number 5 on the list we were just talking about, and that is Goofy the Super Goof. He is a 4-drop character for Ruby. He's a 2/4 with Rush and the ability Super Peanut Powers. Whenever this character challenges another character, you gain 2 lore. Now, as we were just talking about on Philocites, the ability to generate lore out of nowhere is a very, very strong ability. He combos very well with cards like Shield of Virtue in Ruby as well, allowing him multiple challenges in 1 turn. Now, I have been testing him in some Ruby Sapphire builds, and I don't think he's a great fit for the Ruby Sapphire list. However, there are other Ruby lists that are starting to emerge as more of your more traditional Amethyst and Ruby list, and I think he's going to find a home probably in a deck more in line with kind of that early curve, as a way to kind of disrupt their early tempo while not costing you any tempo on your end there. Not quite the auto-include that Maui Hero to All was from Chapter 1, but still a big fan of this card, and that's why I have him at number 5 on my list. All right, number 4 on the list, another Sing Together song. We have Under the Sea, which is an 8-drop uninkable song for Emerald, with the ability to put all opposing characters with 2 strength or less on the bottom of their players' decks in any order. Now, this card takes a little bit of setup against some decks, but against other decks, this thing absolutely cleans house, especially if you're playing it in a deck that can sing it out very early. such as the Emerald Amber list that are kind of starting to emerge right now. It basically becomes a one-sided be prepared. Now, the limitations on this card is why it's not any higher on the list, but depending on how the meta shapes out, this card could be an absolute all-star. Now, because of that, that may actually keep that meta from ever developing because this card exists, sort of like we saw with Steel's ability to kind of make Amber Emerald not relevant in the first few sets. So this card could be so good and so powerful that it just eliminates a lot of those lower curve cards, because especially with like Ariel coming in on 3, this song could be going off on turn 4 and completely reset your board if you're playing a more aggro build. And because of that, I've got it at number 4 on my list. Now, these top 3 cards are really the cards I've probably tested the absolute most since we've gotten the full spoilers from this set. And the first one of that is going to be number 3 on my list, the Fortisphere, which is a 1-drop item for Steel, which is inkable with the ability Resourceful. When you play this item, you may draw a card and Extract of Steel, 1 ink, and banish this item. Chosen character of yours gains Bodyguard until the start of your next turn. Now, we already know how good Popsicle is, and we basically get another copy of that card added into the Steel Sapphire builds. Now, those lists absolutely love this card. You have effectively taken a deck that relies very heavily on certain combos going off and made it a 52 card deck at this point in time with Fortisphere and Popsicle in that deck. The secondary ability, Extract of Steel, is not a bad ability either, especially whenever it's usually paired with Sapphire, who has cards like Grandma Tala or the Detective Mickey Mouse, who they don't mind if those characters actually get challenged and banished to protect other higher lore generating characters or bigger characters that we want to keep alive for longer in the game. Just an absolute powerhouse of a card, and I think a card you're going to see an absolute ton of in the next meta, just due to the fact, again, any Steel deck that's out there can run 4 of these and effectively concentrate their deck down to a 56 card deck, which goes a long way in and of itself. But if you can couple that with a deck that actually benefits from either gaining the Bodyguard or gaining the extra item in play, then I think you're going to have a ton of decks that are looking to this card for that synergy. All right, number 2 on the list is another 1-drop comment, and that's Pegasus, Gift for Hercules. He's a 1-drop for Emerald, which is inkable with a 1/1, and he is evasive. Now, this card doesn't look like a lot on paper, but this card is really, really essential for Emerald, and I think possibly the missing piece for Emerald Ruby decks that had been looking to kind of emerge after last meta, and even Emerald Sapphire aggro decks that have really been looking for those extra 1-drops, as Emerald only had one 1-drop at that point in time, and that, without going to your kind of your default 2/2s for 1, this card effectively gives them another really, really solid 1-drop to go into. It does have a bigger shift target as well. Not as big a fan of the shift target, but your opponent's never going to know whether or not that card is in your deck as well. It's definitely not so bad that it will never not get played. So they'll always have to wonder like how much of a priority that they have to put on this little guy. I think you're going to see this card in every single Emerald list, but I also think that this thing opens up at least 2 more Emerald archetypes for that early rush type deck, just due to the consistency of having that staple 1-drop to play on your turn 1 of each game. All right, before we get to our number 1 card on the list, I do have 2 honorable mentions, and they both are in the legendary rarity spot. First one being Ursula, the Sea Witch Queen. Now, everybody's familiar with this card. She is the feature villain of this set. She is a 7-drop for Amethyst, inkable, 4/7, 3 lore generator with a shift of 5. First ability, Now I Am the Ruler. Whenever this character quests, exert chosen character. And you'll listen to me as a secondary ability. Other characters can't exert to sing songs. Now, this card has a ton of potential. However, I don't think it fits in the transitional meta that we have right now. I don't know that it plays a very big role in these early few days, but could end up being a really, really powerful card in an emerging meta due to a couple reasons. One, the shift cost is very, very aggressive for her stat lines and very, very easy to pull off. We have a number of very playable Ursulas already, so you don't have to really play any bad Ursulas to set up that shift. You can play 8 really good ones in Emerald, and you have another decent one in Amethyst too, if you really just wanted to make sure on turn 5 you always had the ability to shift into this character. Now, her first ability is actually really strong as well. There is a number of character cards that sit back and kind of either have effects on the board. Now, a growing number of those do have ward, so she doesn't get around that. But for those that don't, it gives you a way to kind of control the board and a color that doesn't have a ton of board control. And her second ability, the You'll Listen to Me, where other characters can't exert to sing songs. Now, right out of the gates, I don't know that that effect is going to have a ton of application. However, if we do end up in a format where Amber Singers really is kind of the deck to beat, whether it goes the Steel Song route or the Emerald route, this card can kind of come in and shut that deck off on turn 5, which is a very, very strong ability. So that's why this card didn't quite make the list of top 10, but I think has the opportunity to be a real breakout card from this set as well. The other card I wanted to mention is Diablo, Devoted Herald. He is a 3-drop for Emerald, uninkable, 2/2, 1 lore generator with shift, discard, and action card. He does have evasive and has the ability circle far and wide. During each opponent's turn, whenever they draw a card while this character is exerted, you may draw a card. Now, this card has got a lot going for it. The evasive early on makes it very hard for a lot of decks to deal with, and its ability circle far and wide is pretty card advantageous. The fact that it's also a Floodborn triggers cards like Bucky or Chief Bogo, so it does have a lot going for it. However, it also has a lot working against it. Emerald right now has got a growing number of staples in their builds, Bucky lists especially, that are already uninkable, and this card just adds to that equation. And while it does have evasive, its stat line isn't very robust for a 3-drop. With only 2 willpower, pretty much every direct damage action that's out there can take care of it. With less than 3 strength, you also have the Ruby decks that'll be ramping up to take care of it as well. It doesn't have a lot of survivability, and in reality, it's really going to need to survive a turn before it can get its circle far and wide off, because while it does have shift, the shift isn't card advantageous. You're going to have to play another Diablo in your deck, which I'm not a big fan of any of the other Diablos before, you know, we really even take into consideration the fact that you have to discard a card to shift it. You also have to play the other Diablos and take up a spot in your deck to play the other Diablos, and they're just not great cards. They're both 2/1s for 1 with really kind of mediocre effects. So I'm not a fan of playing the Diablos to have him as a shift target, but then also having to have an action card in your hand and discard that action card to get him in and quest with him in the same turn to get value out of him. There's just a lot of things that are limiting this card. It has a lot of upside, and I think if we see maybe a different type of Emerald deck emerge from like the Bucky builds, or just possibly reworking some of the uninkables that are already in the list, we could make it a little bit more consistent. But as it stands right now, it's just too hard to pull off for a sometime effect. I don't think it's a great top deck late in the game. And outside of really just hitting that on curve and hoping your opponent isn't playing the counter to it, I just don't like where it sits right now going into the other meta, but I think it does have potential, and that's why I have it in the honorable mentions. All right, now for my number 1 card on the list. I have actually tested this card more than any other card. I have it in 3 separate builds right now for decks that I'm testing for the new meta about to come out, and that is Ariel, the Treasure Collector. She is a 6-drop uninkable for Sapphire. She is a 3/4, 3 lore generator with Ward, with the ability The Girl Who Has Everything. While you have more items in play than each opponent, this character gets +2 lore. So with very little work, she is a 5 lore generator with Ward, which is, in my opinion, much better play than Belle, who we've seen a lot of competitive play. And I know what you're going to say. She costs 6, Belle costs 4. But does Belle really cost 4? I mean, she very rarely ever comes out on turn 4. She rarely even gets played until you are already at the threshold to turn her on for 5 lore, which essentially means she can't come down until you have 10 ink in play. Ariel is already a good, strong lore generator, even if you're not winning the item battle. But guess what the best item color is? Sapphire. So she's already in the color that has the most support for her abilities. Against 99% of the decks that are out there, 1 item in play is going to be enough to make her a 5 lore generator with Ward on turn 6. Her overall stats are not bad either. Now, granted, she's not going to survive Maui. She's not going to survive, Rush Mim, but she does survive a lot of other characters that are out there, which is really, really nice. She pairs very, very well with a number of the decks that want this effect. I have her in right now in the Sapphire and Steel. I have her in my Ruby Steel, and I even have her in my Emerald Sapphire list. And honestly, like, the number of times like you just get her out and she just takes over the game very quickly, even if you can't ramp into her, even if she's just played on curve, that generation of 5 lore puts your opponent on a very quick clock. She becomes a huge threat at 6 that your opponent has to deal with, and they have to deal with her through a challenge because they cannot get through that ward. With a lot of the meta moving more towards like powerful song effects to deal with characters or powerful abilities of other characters to come into play, Ward is getting even better, and the fact that we have a 5 lore generator with Ward is just absolutely crazy. I think she's going to be the win condition of a lot of decks in the newest meta, and that is why I have her as my number 1 spot for this set. So there you guys have it. There are my top 10 picks for most impactful cards for Ursula's return. Let me know what you guys think. I'd love to hear what your top 10 picks are down in the comment section below as well. And until next time, guys, Hobby Hero out.